Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod, continuing our Big Ten previews as we get closer to the top with today's check-in at Madison, Wisconsin, with number 5 on the list, the Wisconsin Badgers. Okay, Rod. So last season was, I guess, a little better than usual for the Badgers. They are a team that has been a team that you don't really ever think about in some respects. I mean, I definitely thought you thought about them more when Bill Ryan was in charge, but I feel like with Greg Gard, they are kind of an afterthought. Yet they are a team that's consistently in the top, we'll say 8 of the league almost every year. I don't maybe they've been the bottom half of the league once in the last couple of years. They're just sort of always there, despite having the lack of quote unquote talent. They seem to always be a solid team, a team that's tricky, and again, even when they're an afterthought, they seem to do pretty well. And last year they went 27-10, 13-7 in the league. They made the championship game in the Big Ten tournament, and then won an NCAA tournament game, and then ending falling to BYU, which is kind of a hot team coming into the tournament, and it's a close game as well. So I guess you'd say a successful year for Greg Gard and his team. Although, I think probably we've talked about this before when we were going through the sort of at the end of the season wrap up, that Wisconsin fans sort of have been a little bit spoiled by, I guess, the success Wisconsin's had the last, we'll say, 30 years. And Greg Gard still does not feel like a guy who is on firm footing. At least that's my impression, despite having pretty good success.
I'm going to differ with that.
Okay.
I think that might have been true 3 years ago. I don't think that's true now. And I could be wrong, but I get no sense that Gard is under any kind of heat in that job. Um, I also would push back a little bit against the way that you described his performance. I think what's happened the couple of years prior to last year, what happened is they got off to strong starts and then kind of faded late
Yeah.
in the season. So that happened the year before with AJ Storr. Remember, they got a lot of hype early because AJ Storr got a lot of hype because he got off to a
Right.
great start. And then he got less efficient as the year went on and they struggled. They actually had some pretty good teams when Johnny Davis was there. So,
Right.
yeah, I think they've been pretty good. They had 1 year in there where they failed to make the tournament. And at Wisconsin, the way things have gone the last 25 years, that's a big that's a big deal. I mean, they're like Michigan State. They
Yeah.
expect to make the tournament every year. And so the
As
fact that they
that's your
didn't,
floor. Yeah.
that was a negative. But again, I just don't get any sense that Gard is under any real kind of heat anymore. I think there was a period where that was the case, but I think he's done enough to hang in that job, and I don't hear anything. I don't see any talk about Wisconsin looking to push him out. I think he'd need to have a really bad year for that to happen, and I don't know that I think that's coming anytime soon.
He
Um,
certainly doesn't seem like a guy who's
last
going to exit, right? I mean, that's the
last
other thing.
year, last year actually, this guy did short of the job that Tom Izzo did, which was easily the best in the league. I'd say Greg Gard did the second best job in the league because he lost arguably his two best players from the year before. He had Storr go to Kansas, he had Chucky Hepburn transfer to Louisville. And they also
Right.
missed on some of their top portal candidates. Frankie Fiddler was a
Frankie
guy they
Fiddler, right.
wanted, didn't
Yeah.
get. There were some others. Um, so, I mean, given all of that, it was unclear. Forget improving. Could they even tread water? I think when you look at 27-10, 13-7 in the league, got to the child's birthday party sack race championship game, and won a tournament game before, as you noted, they lost to a very hot, very good BYU team in a really tight game. They lost by a bucket. They had chances to win that.
Yeah.
I think that's a hell of a compliment to that guy. I think he did a great job. Now, he's got to do it again because it's a somewhat similar situation. that they're facing, and that they've lost some key guys and they've got some new guys via the portal in. So they've got to hope that that transition happens as smoothly as it did a year ago. But man, I am very bullish on the job Greg Gard did a year ago. They
Yeah, I
also,
agree.
it's worth noting, they don't play, or at least last year, they didn't play the same way. We are used to
Right.
Wisconsin having, and this is basically a 30-year deal because it started with Dick Bennett. Bo Ryan did some things differently. He wasn't a carbon copy of Dick Bennett, but the thing they shared in common was the pace of play
Right.
and the emphasis on valuing the ball. And for most of Guard's run, they played that way. But last year, they were squarely in the middle of teams nationally in tempo. That's by far the fastest that they've played in the Ken Palm era, which goes back to I think the tail end of the Bennett era. And by a considerable margin, like second place isn't even close. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, it was typical Wisconsin stuff, though. Solid defensive rebounding. They shot the two and defended against the two very well, and they were elite in terms of avoiding turnovers, and they were the best free throw shooting team in America. Remember, last year, Michigan State was just fantastic from the line all year
Yeah.
long, like right around the 80% mark as a team for most of the year, or very close to that. And yet they were never the best team in the Big Ten because Wisconsin was always a step
Yeah.
ahead in terms of the percentage that they shot. So they did a lot of those things well that good Wisconsin teams do well, and then added to that that they played a little faster. It's going to be very interesting to me to see if that continues. I kind of suspect that it will.
Yeah.
Um, they're not trying to be Michigan State, but playing with a little more energy, a little more pace on the offensive end, I think did very productive, very good things for that team. And I would expect that they'll continue, but that's something worth watching. And then, as I say, they've got some key pieces back, but they also lost a bunch of key guys. They brought in new faces that are, in many instances, pretty highly regarded. So the key is going to be how well do the and how quickly do these new guys adjust? I think most people are generally pretty bullish on Wisconsin, but I think some of that is based on how well the transitions for those transfers went a year ago. And I don't think you can just assume that it's going to go that well. I've obviously got them fifth, so
Yeah.
I'm anticipating that it's going to go well, but that's not a lock.
Sure. Well, and that almost goes with every team at this point. I mean, there's so many moving parts. I would say too, and I think we noted this even the year before last season, that it has felt like Wisconsin has been slowly evolving into a faster team. Like this has not been like last year was definitely notably different, but it wasn't like it was a complete sudden departure from the previous years. I feel like you've kind of seen this
It,
coming. That's a new way of
I
slowly evolving from the Bo Ryan and Dick Bennett days.
I think that's true. But it was happening much more gradually. And,
Yeah.
and again, I
Hmm.
can't emphasize it enough. For Wisconsin to be middle of the pack in pace is remarkable. That's a massive step forward on anything else we've seen. The stuff you're talking about, yes, it may have been drifting that way, but it was very marginal.
Yeah.
This was a whole other deal.
Yeah. It's like suddenly I was throwing for 300 yards passing,
They had that,
for the
well,
football team.
like remember 2 years ago, they had that weird period for about half the season where for some reason they were just rebounding incredibly well on the offensive end, which is
Right.
something they've
Yes.
never done because they always emphasize floor balance, right? And then by the end of the year, it kind of worked itself out. That wasn't
Hmm.
real. This was
Yeah.
real.
Yeah. All right. Well, that season recap was brought to you by Nudge Printing, where we get all our gifts and prizes for our show at nudgeprinting.com. The best Spartan apparel, whatever sport it is you're playing, whether it's golf, hockey, basketball, baseball, or football. Make sure you get your Spartan gear there. Vintage logos, new current logos, and all kinds of new stuff. The highest quality apparel, super comfortable, very washable, very breathable. Their sweatshirts are the most comfortable, as are their t-shirts, and I can attest to that as I have a lot of them, and they are the favorite of my family. Make sure you get one today. Head on over to nudgeprinting.com at TFF, or sorry, well, You can get Nudge Printing stuff for our show at nudgeprinting.com/TFFINOTS. Otherwise, nudgeprinting.com. Type in Final Forge, one word, at checkout to get 20% off the order. Do it today. You'll be glad you did. And also, you get on that email list, so you get offers, you get notifications of all the new sales they're having. Which they have at least once or twice a month. They have a sale of something, some new product that's coming out. All right, so let's talk about the key departures and retention for Wisconsin going to the 2025-26 season. I will begin with the biggest one, of course, is John Tanji. He was sort of I think he was the one they went after because they couldn't get Frankie Fiddler. And
That's right. That's
yeah,
right.
he was coming off injury, came out of Missouri where he was pretty good and just hit his stride last year. 6'5" power
Well,
wing. Go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, averaged 19 points a game, 5.3 rebounds a game, shot 47, 39, 91, 7 free throw attempts a game. He was dominant. He was, easily their
Yeah.
best player.
He
And
was great. And if
yeah,
you
he was
remember
great.
that which I know you saw in person, that Big Ten tournament semifinal against Michigan State,
Yes.
Michigan State had handled him in the
Yep.
regular season game pretty damn well and couldn't do anything with him in that tournament game. The thing about Tanji, though, is he actually didn't do anything at Missouri. He got hurt the year before almost immediately. And so his contributions were virtually nil. Where he had been pretty good was at Colorado State before
That's it.
that.
Yep. Right.
Okay. So pretty good at Colorado State, transfers up to Missouri, essentially a lost season, moves on to Wisconsin. But because there was that lost season and he was coming off an injury, I think the feeling was nobody really knew what this guy was going to be capable of doing. And all he did was make himself as impact. I mean, I know Braden Smith won Player of the Year, um,
Right.
but I gotta say, uh, John Tanji was, in my mind, as good as anybody in the league last year. So to say that he's a significant loss is understating the case dramatically. This guy was really, really good because he truly was a three-level scorer. That gets, even I use that a lot. That gets tossed around a lot, but
Yeah.
usually a guy like that, it's going to be mostly a jump shooter or mostly a guy who goes to the basket. This guy truly could do all of those things and in the mid-range very, very well. I mean, you look at the 3-point percentage, almost 40%, and yet he's also averaging 7 free throw attempts per game.
Right.
That's that's what I'm talking about. That balance. So big loss. I mean, it's goes without saying it's going to be very difficult, I think, for Wisconsin in one guy to make up for all that production. I don't think it'll necessarily be one guy.
Yeah, it's interesting because you look at Wisconsin and the previous year they lost AJ Storr and it looked like wow, how do you replace that guy? He's going to Kansas.
Well,
He was best, and then they get John Tanji, who is I
was
think you
better.
can probably argue he's better, certainly better throughout
Hands
the
down
entire
better.
season. Yeah,
Hands down better. Not even close.
okay,
AJ Storr was kind of a half season wonder.
that's true.
He
First half of the
was
season, he was
great
lights
in
out.
the first
Yeah,
half of the season. And that's when we had, you remember we had Coach Garland on who
right.
talked about how he thought he was an NBA player. And then from basically that point on, Storr got much less efficient. His final numbers in terms of efficiency were not eye popping. And then he
No,
goes to Kansas and does essentially nothing.
yeah.
I know he's transferred elsewhere. I forget where he's ended up. But yeah, they bring in Tanji, and Tanji ends up being a much better player over the course of the whole season.
So the next player we'll talk about is Stephen Kroll, who feels like he'd been playing about 10 years at Wisconsin, 7-foot senior. I think last year he really put it together. He was a little more inconsistent throughout the previous part of his career, but he averaged almost 10 points a game, a little over 5 rebounds a game, shot 54, 42, and 82. And I feel like that 42 is really where he made a big difference. He definitely had a little higher volume last season, and he's much
That
more
is
consistent with that
correct.
3-point shot.
His efficiency went up. Before that, he had a few years there where, he'd shoot around 30, 31%. And you'd say, well, I can see it, but it's not quite there yet. That really reliable stretch element that Wisconsin has often had. Last year it arrived. You're absolutely right. Um, really, really a lot of credit for him um, to have that kind of year. I think it was very impressive. The the thing is, if you were talking about him as a sophomore, I think the expectations were, okay, well, here's the next guy to come along in this long line of great big men that they've had.
Right.
Brian Butch, Frank Kaminsky, Ethan Happ, all these guys. He looked like he was going to fit into that line because he was 7 feet, but skilled, could run the floor a little bit, mobile, but looked like he had the potential to develop into a low post guy as well. All of that was all there. And it never quite got there. But I think that, he was a key part of a very successful team last year. So in the end, maybe he didn't quite meet the expectations they had for him early, but still a good end to a 5 year run.
Yep. Absolutely. And then sort of on the other end, I would say is Max Klesmit, 5'4" senior, averaging a little over 9 points a game with 2.7 assists per game. Shot 35, 29, and 85. And he's a guy who certainly looked like from his outside shooting that he was going to be good, or be really good this his senior year. And he went the opposite direction. I feel like he only shot under 30%. I mean, 29%. That was sort of, I think, what was probably really disappointing for him.
Yeah, he was still valuable because he had a
Yeah.
toughness and the experience level was important to them, but the perimeter shooting was not nearly as good as it was the year before. And so that I think he battled some injury difficulties during the
Yeah,
course of
he
the year
did.
at times. So that probably had an impact as well. But yeah, I would agree. A little bit disappointing.
And before we talk about the returning players, we wipe away the departures. Just a reminder to go to the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. If you need your windows cleaned, your house washed, or something cleaned off in your house on the inside or the outside, the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids, that's the place you should go. Great pricing, great people. They can take care of whatever size job it is, whether it's a small home, a business, high rise. They can do whatever it is. So make sure you contact and reach out to them first before you go anywhere else. You get 15% off as a listener of the show. Just mention Final Four when you get your estimate. You can do that at the support page at the Final Four. It's on the schedule.com/support, or for those who are lazy, tffinots.com/support. Do it today. Be glad you did. Get a hold of Troy and his team. They'll take real good care of you and get those windows nice and clean. All right. So we'll begin with John Blackwell. Obviously, he's probably the most important returnee, 6'4" junior, very athletic. He's score averaged almost 16 points a game last year, a little over 5 rebounds, shot 45, 32, and 81. He was not shooting quite as well from outside last year, but on a little bit higher volume. But he definitely is a very good player. I think he came out of Michigan, didn't he? I believe so.
That's
And
correct.
yeah,
He played at Birmingham Brother Rice.
right. Yeah.
Um,
So, yep.
Look, I mean, John Blackwell is, and this used to happen with more frequency than it does now, just because the number of um, guys who are capable of going to high major or even mid major plus programs out of the state of Michigan is lower. But this used to happen with some frequency where there would be so many guys who could play that Michigan and Michigan State weren't going to take them all.
Right.
And sometimes you would have a guy who would slip through. Um, and Romulus had a couple of these kids back when Nate Oates was coaching there. And that's the most recent examples, but I can think of lots of them over the years where a guy just kind of slips through the cracks and ends up being really, really, really good. John
Mm-hmm.
Blackwell is that. John Blackwell, it's funny to say now, but there were a lot of people who thought he was the third best prospect on that Brother Rice team, which, by the way, was a team that never really even came close to winning a state championship, despite having multiple
Huh.
D1 players on the roster. Uh, but I think by the time he was entering his senior year, he'd already committed to Wisconsin as a junior. So I,
Right.
I remember my reaction when it happened was, boy, I wish he would have waited because I could see him being the kind of guy that maybe later in the recruitment, Michigan State might get focused on, might get interested in. But he pulled the trigger to Wisconsin. He stuck with them. He stuck with them this offseason, where I guarantee you he had probably almost certainly had higher dollar value offers to enter the portal.
Yeah.
Um, and so he's been loyal to them. But this is a guy who was outside the top 150 nationally. But by the time he was entering his senior year, people in Michigan knew, basketball people in Michigan knew this guy is better than the rankings indicate. He's going to be a good player at Wisconsin. I don't know that anybody saw quite this
Yeah.
because he's now entering his junior year. And honestly, I can't see a good reason to not think that he's going to be a first team all league guy this year. He's primed for it. I mean, you look at the production that he had last season and factor in that, as you noted, the 3-point shooting efficiency went down from his freshman year where he was up near 50%.
Right.
I got to think some of that's going to come back. And if it does, combining it with everything else that he does, whew, look out. I said, I maybe misspoke because I said, and in a way, maybe not, when I was talking about Tanji and said it's probably not one guy that can replace him. The fact is, uh, Blackwell can, I will not be surprised at all if his numbers are as good or perhaps even better than Tanji's were a year ago. That is very possible. The question is going to be, can they then find somebody to also give them what Blackwell gave them last year?
Right.
That's going to be the deal. But
Yeah.
John Blackwell is a great player. I think with room to get even better again if that shot gets dialed in, that jumper. But he's going to be an impactful guy, and I think he's going to be one of the top handful of players in the league.
Yeah. I mean, you look at their numbers; they're actually not too far off. I mean, Tanji
No,
averaged 4 points more a game. He shot 39 versus 32%,
right.
91 versus 81% from the line. But outside, it's both 5 rebounds. I mean, pretty similar, stats and
Well,
stat
there's
lines.
some things I don't know that I would expect John Blackwell to average 7 free throw attempts per game, but maybe he
Right.
will. Um, but that's just impressive stuff.
Yeah.
And he's going to be uh, he's going to be a star. Simple as that.
Another important returnee is Nolan Winter. He's the other 7-footer they had on the team last year, 235-pound junior. He averaged almost 9.5 points a game, a little under 6 rebounds a game, shot 56, 36, and 77. And so I feel like he's sort of a Stephen Kroll, but he's about a year or two faster along than Stephen was.
Well, I think there was a good argument that he was actually a better player than Kroll last year.
Yeah, that's
Their numbers are pretty
okay.
similar, but I think Winter just seemed like the guy more likely in any given game to have a big outing. You know,
Yeah.
you kind of
I
knew
think he
what
was
you were
better
going to get
defensively
from
too,
Kroll.
felt like, but
Winter was capable of doing more. And yeah, I mean, you hesitate in a sense because Kroll didn't end up cashing in on it, but Winter clearly looks like a guy who could be another very, very good Wisconsin big man. And I'm not going to be surprised at all to see his scoring tick up. And, if we, this time next year, we're talking about him having scored 14 points a night, wouldn't surprise me at all. I think he's primed for it. And yeah, another very, very good player who's just starting, like Blackwell, his classmate, to find himself. This is vintage Wisconsin though with these two
right.
guys because Winter also was not a super heavily recruited guy. He had interest from other high majors, but not big time programs other than Wisconsin. Um, and then you look at these two guys as juniors and you say, well, these are probably two of the better players in the league. And they were relatively anonymous is too strong, but they were not highly regarded high school prospects to the point that they had major recruiting battles over them. And
Uh-huh.
yet you look at what they are, that's Wisconsin basketball. Bo Ryan
Yes.
very, 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 very rarely there were a handful, but for the most part, he was not dealing with, top 50 recruits. He'd get some guys in the lower end of the top 100, and then there were always guys that were outside of it, but he'd make it work. And a lot of Greg Gard's run. Greg Gard has very rarely gotten guys that were projected to be superstars.
Right.
Johnny Davis wasn't when they got
It's
him. And he
Yeah.
ends up being a lottery pick. Now, his NBA career hasn't gone too well, but nevertheless, he got there. He was a
Yeah.
lottery pick. Uh, and so this is just kind of what that program does. Take guys that are good, maybe aren't considered great in high school, but they like the fit and they develop them and they plug them into roles where they can excel. And this is what you get.
The unheralded players development team. So I mean, so then we move to that kind of intriguing piece. Just Jack Janicki, 6'6" sophomore. Guy didn't play a ton, especially early, but just kind of found his way onto the court at near the end of the season a lot more. He averaged almost 2 points a game, shot 39, 28, and 33. But he's just kind of the guy who just was in the right place at the right time, oftentimes in plays, and
Yeah.
just that's sort of just like a nose for the ball, I guess, or feel for
Yeah,
the game.
the efficiency numbers were not great, and as you say, his actual production, not even 2 points a game. There's not a ton to go on there, but if you watched them play, especially second half of the season, you're right. This guy, he looked like he belonged. That's the best
Hmm.
way I can put it.
Yeah,
He looked like a standard issue Wisconsin wing. The size, the style of play, the grittiness, the
the last
headiness,
name.
all of
Yeah,
that. Yeah. Now, can he get more efficient with the shot? Um, can he start to impact the game in a little more obvious, profound way? That's what remains to be seen here. And I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to guess that Janicki plays a key role either as a starter or perhaps more likely a key reserve.
yeah. And then we'll finish up with the couple players more. Riccardo Greppi, 6'10", 255 pound sophomore from Italy, just played a few games last year.
Yeah, and that you can always use size. So I don't rule out that something could happen here. I looked into it. I didn't really see any indications from Wisconsin coverage over the
Hmm.
summer that Greppy is, really popped some eyeballs. But when you're 6'10", 255, you've always got a shot if you can
Yeah.
pull some things together. At this point, I would say he's less likely to play significant minutes, but again, size is size. You just never know.
And finally, as far for returning players, Jack Robeson, 6'5" sophomore, who played very little last season.
And I think expectations are somewhat muted this time around as well
Same as
because of the
before.
the guys they brought in.
Well, let's talk about the guys they brought in, the newcomers for the Badgers. And we'll start with Nick Boyd, who's a 6'3" senior, played at FAU during the Final Four, played at San Diego State last year. He averaged 13.4 points a game, a little under or assists per game, with a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. He shot 41, 35, and 75.
Yeah, and this is the headline edition. They got a lot. We're going to go through a lot of names here
Right.
between transfers and freshmen. But Nick Boyd definitely the headliner. You really, if you're Greg Gard, I think you have to like this addition on a number of levels. Obviously, you start with the productivity. The numbers he put up at San Diego State, very good. He's a solidly efficient shooter, did a good job running the offense. Wisconsin
Hmm.
doesn't really play a pure point guard the way that most other teams do. So they rarely have guys put up huge assist numbers.
Right.
But Boyd will be a guy who handles the ball a lot for them and you like what he brings there. But then you look at his experience. So he's already been in a Final Four playing for old Dusty. And
Did he play against San Diego State,
And then,
the
well,
team that he
then
was with last
that was
year?
before. And then last year, he played for another all time coaching great, Brian Dutcher at San Diego State. Um, I hope everybody reads the sarcasm in that.
Or
Dutcher's
my
a
laugh, yeah.
solid on court guy, but he was a scumbag when he was at Michigan as an assistant. Anyway, um, and And so Boyd's been through it. He's played a lot of high level basketball because San Diego State, in the Mountain West, that's a tough league. You
Yeah.
come through that and you produce at that league. In my mind, you're legit. And so I think that uh, there's a reasonably good chance that Wisconsin's going to get high level play out of Nick Boyd, which is what they need. Again, we talked about, all right, maybe Blackwell can actually do pretty much what Tanji did a year ago, but then who's giving you what Blackwell gave you last year?
Exactly.
That's where a player like Nick Boyd comes in.
And then we have Austin Rapp. He's a 6'10", 230-pound sophomore transfer from Portland. He was West Coast Conference Freshman of the Year, averaged almost 14 points a game, 6.5 rebounds a game, 1.5 blocks a game. He shot 40, 35, and 82, and that's with some real heavy three volume of almost 8 attempts per game.
Yeah. Interesting player and a guy that was seen. I don't recall all the programs that were in on him in that portal recruitment, but he was definitely a guy that people seemed excited about when Wisconsin got him. And you could see why. So he brings them a lot of the same things that Kroll did. 35% from three on almost 8 attempts a game.
That's
All right,
crazy.
that's a legit stretch guy.
Yeah.
Like when you play Wisconsin, you are going to have to guard him away from the rim. He also gives them an element they really didn't have in anybody a year ago, which is some shot blocking, 1.5 a game. If that translates to the Big Ten level, well, he's giving you and Wisconsin's not a program that's ever really emphasized that, but you'll take it
Right.
when you can get it. If he can do the other things they need done defensively and give them a little bit more of that, hey, that's a bonus. I think the other thing that's really good about it from a Wisconsin perspective is that it allows you to keep Nolan Winter at the four, where he was very
Right.
comfortable a year ago. So that matters. That helps as well. But this, again, another very savvy addition, I think, and only a sophomore. So they've got him for a while. But that was another nice addition. And I think Rapp is a guy just like Boyd who's going to slip right into that starting lineup.
Yeah, and they're bringing so much height. You expect the rebounding to be, again, very solid and maybe
Well,
even a
it'll
little better
be,
on the offensive end, right?
I don't know about
Depends
the
how they
offensive
play.
rebounding. That's a systemic thing. But
Yeah, I suppose. Style play.
if you're saying will their defensive rebounding slip much? It shouldn't, based
Yeah.
on what we know right now.
Moving on then to Andrew Rohde, 6'6" senior transfer from Virginia. He's a original kid from Wisconsin. He averaged a little over 9 points a game, 4.3 assists per game, shot 43, 41, and 77.
Yeah. So two things here. Well, three things. One, a senior.
Yep.
Two, a senior who played high level, high major basketball. Three, he shot 41% from three.
Yep.
I think all of that adds up to a likely starting spot on the wing. And if that shooting can translate, boy, that's a big help.
Yeah. And then we have Braden Carrington, 6'5", senior transfer from Tulsa. He began his career at Minnesota, so back in the Big Ten. He averaged 7.4 points a game last year, 4.8 rebounds a game, shot 34, 34, and 73.
Yeah, and I think a solid addition to be a guy, along with likely with Janicki, who is coming off the bench in the backcourt for them. I remember when he started at Minnesota, he was one of I think the first recruiting class Ben Johnson had, I think. And he was a guy, an in-state guy that they thought might be able to develop into something. He struggled at Minnesota, as I recall, goes to Tulsa, has not a spectacular year, you could tell by the numbers, but a solid year.
Yeah.
And that's all Wisconsin's looking for here is solid. If he can come close to replicating what he did at Tulsa, at least in efficiency terms, at Wisconsin, they'll take that. Because I don't think they need 25 minutes a night out of him.
They just need someone to be solid. And if you need someone solid to take care of your gutters, contact the brothers at Just Gutters. The brothers do fantastic work, whether it's a small job or big job, whether it's commercial or residential. They can come out and take care of you whether you're on the east side or the west side of the state. Maybe you just need it cleaned out. You want the leaf guards on. You want someone to melt the snow on your gutters, or just you need them replaced or repaired. The brothers can take care of whatever it might be. They'll come out quickly. They'll give you a quick estimate, and they'll take care of it very fast. And they have really nice people who work for them. So check them out at our support page at the Final Four is on the schedule.com/support. There you can contact either Kurt or Greg, depending on what part of the state you're on. You can get 10% off. You mentioned Final Four when you get your estimate. So check them out today and take care of that before the snow starts to fly. Get that done today. And, they can clean out your gutters so you don't have to do it because all the leaves are out there right now. All right. So moving on to now, not transfers, but we meet Zach Kinzinger. He's a 6'3", top 100 freshman, a Wisconsinite.
Yeah. And he's seen as a guy who could play either on or off the ball, had a reputation as a solid shooter. I think he's in that range that you can't assume instant impact, but you also can't rule it out. And I would think well, it's all going to depend on how quickly he makes that transition
Sure.
from high school into big time college basketball. And if he can make that transition quickly, there's probably a reserve role here for him, but it's going to be very competitive in terms of minutes behind. I think the three starters are pretty obvious, but I think the competition behind them is going to be very stiff, and
Yeah.
he'll be in that mix. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Well, and a player who seems to always be somewhere in the pipeline for Wisconsin, Will Garlock. He's a Garlock, I should say, 6'11", 235-pound freshman. So he's a big and with a potential to be a stretch threat at some point in his career.
Yeah, they say that he's skilled and potentially will develop into a stretch that I'm not sure how long that they think that'll take. So I think the question here is pretty obvious. In addition to how quickly does the understanding translate, the other thing is, does the strength and bulk hold up as a true freshman?
Right.
235 isn't terrible, but it's also a thing at that level. You could be 235 and still not really be ready for
Right.
Big Ten physicality, and then you'd be 235 and you can handle it. So we don't know yet with Garlock which one he's going to be. And Wisconsin has a need for size off their bench. They're starting those two bigs, we assume, but they're going to need at least one, maybe two, to play off the bench.
And then we have Hayden Jones, a Kiwi, 6'7" freshman from New Zealand. He averaged 11.6 points a game, 2.7 assists per game. We're playing in the under 17 World Championship in FIBA for New Zealand.
Yeah, tough one to peg in
Pretty good
terms
for New
of,
Zealand. They don't usually have really great basketball teams, so for them to finish fourth place is pretty good.
yeah, they've had some players though, and I want to say, let me look this up while we're talking just to confirm this, because I have an inkling as to where this came from. Um, Kirk Penny, if you remember him,
I
he
don't.
was a big time player for Dick Bennett. He was on that team in 2000 that went to the Final Four with
Okay.
Michigan State. The Michigan State beat in the semifinals. And I want to see, I could have sworn that he was on staff. Let me see.
Oh,
Um, yeah, coaching administrative. Well, in 2019, he was on the staff at the University of Virginia. And yeah, and he's been in a special assistance role at Wisconsin since 23. So I have a strong suspicion that
yeah.
this is one that Kirk Penny is behind. I believe that. I believe I read that's the case actually. So it wasn't like I pulled that out
I
of the.
was like, that was pretty impressive. You remember a player from Wisconsin from 25 years ago.
No, I do remember Kirk Penny. Kirk Penny was a great shooter, and he was actually pretty similar physically to Hayden Jones. He was like 6'6". Jones is 6'7". And as you say, New Zealand, not a country that produces a ton of major college basketball talent. So he was a key guy on a good Big Ten team at that time. He
Yeah.
stuck out. Uh, I don't know how ready Hayden Jones is or isn't. As I've noted, the competition for backup minutes at the guard spots is pretty stiff.
Yeah.
But, you know, how ready is he? We'll see. They say he's got skills. He's obviously got size. And you might even see him. I think he's going to be in that mix with a number of other guys that we've already mentioned for reserve minutes. How all that sorts out, and this has frequently been the case at Wisconsin. You know, I can remember years where they would have, and I'm struggling to remember the kid's name. It was actually when Kroll came in, there was another kid like 6'10 in the same recruiting class, reportedly had similar kinds of skills. And it was interesting, okay, which one of these guys is going to emerge? And it obviously ended up being Kroll. This
Uh-huh.
strikes me as kind of a similar scenario. There's a few younger players here. You're not quite sure how it's going to develop, but it will sort out over the next several months.
And finally, we have Alexis Bieluskas, 6'10", 240-pound Lithuanian freshman, who I suppose would be a reserve for the team.
Well, I think it's probably, if you assume that the Italian returnee, Greppi, is probably not going to get there, then I think it's probably between he and Garlock for
I got you. Yeah.
the for that first big off the bench, and maybe only big, because one of the things they could potentially do, you know, with guys like Jones at 6'7", maybe definitely a kid like Janicki at 6'6", you could see them going with some lineups that have a smaller four at times,
Yeah.
which might mean they only need one true big. But the thing about this kid that they like is not only does he have the usual kind of European versatility on offense, but uh, they say he's a physical player. He doesn't shy away from playing physically. And at 6'10", 240, seems like he's probably got the kind of body that he might be able to, and given that he comes from a pro background in the Baltics, seems like he might actually be able to throw that size around a little bit.
All right. So then you're talking about this Wisconsin team overall. I mean, obviously you have them as fifth here. That means this is a team definitely in contention to win the Big Ten. Just kind of depends on how things fall. And also that a team that is safely in in the NCAA tournament, obviously the Big Ten tournament. I guess you probably could argue even Illinois that we talked about last show is probably, you'd say, in the contention for Big Ten, but maybe a little bit
If
more on
everything
the
goes
outside.
really, really
Yeah,
well.
it always depends on how things go, and you never and injuries and et cetera, et cetera. But uh, this is a team that is very different from last year. Yet you're pretty high on this team.
I am, because the first and major reason is I'm a big believer in Blackwell and Winter. You know, we
Sure.
talked about it a couple episodes ago with regard to Oregon, saying, well, the reason you have Oregon here is you believe in Biddle and you believe in Shellstead, right? And
Right.
when you've got two guys who could be elite players in the league at the top of your roster, you know, you give that some due deference. That's kind of how I feel about Wisconsin. You got Blackwell's already proven it to an extent. Winter is on the verge. And I really do think at the end of the year we're going to look back and say, yeah, those were two of the top 20 guys in the Big 10 somewhere
Sure.
in that mix. That's a great place to start. You start with that kind of foundation, you're in great shape. And then I think you look at the portal, and at least on paper, it seems they did a really good job. You don't ever know for sure until you see the pieces fit.
Of
But
course.
I like Nick Boyd, not only for how productive he's been, but also because of the background he has. When you're talking about a guy who's already been a key player on a Final Four team and then played a year in a league that's not quite the Big Ten, but isn't that much worse in the Mountain West, and was successful at that level. That
Right.
says something to me. So I liked that. I think Rhodey is a perfect multi-dimensional fit on the wing. They're not going to come ask him to come in and score 20 a night, but if he could shoot efficiently, defend the way they want to, play the way they want to, generally, that's perfect. Uh, and then Rap, you really, you like the combination of rebounding and stretch shooting. And then
Yeah.
if he can add some rim protection to the mix, so much the better. So I really think those additions, if those guys are who I think they are, you are talking about a very good starting five.
Yeah.
And it's a
Yeah. Right.
very
Exactly.
Wisconsin starting five. It's not, some of the things they've done, like in AJ Storr, when you looked at it in retrospect, the way he played wasn't really Wisconsin basketball. It was a little more self-interested, self-focused. Um, I thought Tanji was very productive, but yet fit their style of play better.
Yeah. I
I
agree.
even thought during the Johnny Davis era, they were a little not Wisconsin so much with that. And yet, somebody like John Blackwell, I think, is capable of putting up numbers every bit as good or better than the ones Storr or Johnny Davis put up. And yet, I think he does fit Wisconsin. He
Yeah.
plays the way Greg
Yeah.
Gard wants to play. What I mean by that is Wisconsin's whole thing over decades now has been a team first, unselfish play kind of approach. And that doesn't mean that they don't have stars and guys who emerge as greater or lesser contributors. Of course they do. But when you know it when you see it, when a guy is getting his points within the flow of the way they want to play offensively, and when a
Right.
guy is maybe getting them outside of that. And I like the fit. We've talked a lot during these previews about the way that portal pieces seem likely to fit together. And some places, even though they've got guys who have quote unquote talent, I'm not as sold on the fit. Here, this looks note perfect to me. These guys, if they do what they've done at their previous stops, they look like they fit with the Wisconsin brand of basketball to a T. So that's a good starting point. Wisconsin's never been a team that's relied on their bench a ton, but it does matter that they at least have, say, three guys or so that they can turn to and feel pretty good about. That's an unknown right now
Yeah.
with this team. That's the real question mark. You've got guys who look like they're decent candidates for it, but we've either got freshmen or we've got returnees like a Janicki who, yeah, they showed some things, but let's be honest, it wasn't a super productive year from him. He just kind of
No. Right.
showed some hints to make you think maybe he could be that. So that's where I'm at. I think for them to have a legit shot at winning the league, they probably need, it goes without saying, they need those three new starters to be as good as I think they are. But
Sure.
then they also need two or three guys to really emerge as very reliable bench options that they can use liberally to kind of keep those starters fresh. Again, they're not Michigan State. He's not going to play 10 guys, 11 guys, but eight, yeah, they probably need that.
And he doesn't play as slow as they did in the past. So you
Right.
figure
So
you need
there's
a little bit more
exactly. So
reserves.
assuming
Yeah.
that keeps up, then there's a greater need than there used to be.
Yeah.
Bo Ryan frequently get away with seven. I mean, he did not have deep benches. Gard all along has used his bench a little more than Bo Ryan did, but he has not been Tom Izzo. So I
Yeah.
kind of get to this halfway point where, well, he doesn't need 10 because he probably won't ever use 10. But eight, yeah, he probably needs three guys.
All right. So I guess we'll leave it there. And this is just another quick reminder that check out our support page at tffinots.com/support. We've got all kinds of other deals aside from getting a hold of our main sponsors, Nudge Printing, Brothers Just Two Gutters, and the Squeegee Squatter in Rapids. We have a deal there for if you want some electrolyte solution that I use every day, which has been great. It's good recovery and it helps me keep headaches away for me. So if you want that without having the sugar Gatorade, you can get a free trial. You can check it out at our page called Element. Also, make sure you leave a 5-star written review on your podcast player, wherever it may be, or if you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and get the notification bell. Be sure if you're not on YouTube to check it out. You can subscribe and make sure you catch us after games. You can interact with us as we do a live show after after games, either when I return from home or if it's a away game soon afterwards. So until we talk about the number 4 team that Rod has predicted for the Big Ten, the Final Four is not on the schedule. Go green.